Well, good afternoon to you. 506 Now News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Would be grateful for your contributions today. There's a big report out of NBC over the weekend. Perhaps you've seen it by now. It's going around in all of my text chains, family members and friends sending it along. NBC report, fears grow that Trump will use the military in dictatorial ways if he returns to the White House. That's the piece. And it says outright that anti-Trump forces are now openly plotting to undermine military directives if Trump is reelected. Here's the lead on the piece. Donald Trump is sparking fears among those who understand the inner workings of the Pentagon that he would convert the nonpartisan U.S. military. This is where you can pause for laughter, by the way, that as if Biden hasn't made it a partisan operation, into the muscular arm of his political agenda as he makes comments about dictatorship and devalues the checks and balances that underpin the nation's two-century-old democracy. Now bracing for Trump's potential return, a loose-knit network of public interest groups and lawmakers is quietly devising plans to try to foil any efforts to expand presidential power, which could include pressuring the military to cater to his political needs. They worry in this piece that, quote, plenty of rank-and-file members of the armed forces appear sympathetic to Trump's cause. For more on this subject, I want to bring in retired three-star Army general and co-chair of the Center for American Security at America First Policy Institute, General Keith Kellogg, is here. Sir, good to have you with us. Thank you.
Yeah, good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
What do you make of the fear-mongering coming from NBC and its allies on the left who say that Donald Trump could bring about a military dictatorship?
You know, Vince, I was with the president for 4 years in the White House, and I was with him before that on the campaign trail. And I've talked with him a lot of times, since the last election. I mean, this is just stupid. I mean, he's not going to do something like that. That's not in his DNA. I've talked to him a lot about it. We had multiple opportunities to even invoke the Insurrection Act. The Insurrection Act of 1807, that was actually over 20 times it's been used. The latest by H.W. Bush during the L.A. riots. It's been done by LBJ. It was done by Ulysses S. Grant when he suppressed the KKK. He never even thought about using the Insurrection Act when he could have on several occasions, especially during the September riots. And he never did it because he didn't want to do it. So when people talk about that, I just look at him and I said, you're always reaching for straws to say something about this guy who shouldn't be commander-in-chief. And in fact, as I was with him for 4 years and was pretty comfortable at it, and I think he led the nation well and he protected the nation well, but he never did anything like that for domestic reasons. And I think what you're seeing now, there's a lot of people trying to change the Insurrection Act of 1807 to make sure he doesn't do it. But I'd remind everybody pretty clearly, while Section 1 is clear about Congress calling out the militia, not the Army, Article 2, Section 2 is very clear who the commander-in-chief is the president.
Right. But the idea, to your point, as you mentioned, George H.W. Bush invokes the Insurrection Act during the L.A. riots in the early 90s. There is a lot of chaos in the country right now, and the Insurrection Act is actually the law. I mean, from where I'm sitting, there are definitely times where I could see where the federal government would need to step in and bring some law and order into areas that are in complete chaos in our country.
Well, yeah, but my point, I'm going back to what Trump's DNA is, and they're talking about, he's unhinged and really bad. That's my point. Going back to, he had an opportunity to invoke the Insurrection Act several times, never did it.
Yeah.
So I said, come on, go back and watch what he has done, learn what he has done, and you're making a bogeyman as somebody and something that isn't true.
Right.
And that's the reason I talked about the Insurrection Act of 1807 and how many presidents have used it before. And there's a talk now, we want to change that law. I don't think it's going to happen. But I think that's the thing they're talking about. They're not changing the Constitution. I think they're talking about something like the Insurrection Act.
Well, there's another piece of this that I flagged at the outset is I find it ironic that the left is fear-mongering about Trump turning the military into a partisan operation when the left has worked pretty feverishly to remove anybody who might vote against them. They use the COVID jab as a proxy means to purge the military. of a tremendous number of good Americans who were serving with honor and dignity. And also, they've been forcing a lot of left-wing dogma down the throats of our troops. It's crazy to hear them suggest that it's Donald Trump who would politicize the troops.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of unusual. When I look at the national security threats to the United States, I think the number one, I think we've got several out there. Number one is the border. We've got, there's no southern border.
Right.
But number two is the status of our military. And we have got a real problem in the U.S. military, just not on recruiting, but on our training and ability to fight if necessary going forward. And that is the direct result of this administration and what they're doing. Look, you're looking at the Army today, and I'll just use the Army as an example. The Army has missed its recruiting levels in the last 3 years. Last year was 66%. It's now going to be the smallest Army we've had since 1940. The Navy's running the same problems. The Air Force is running the same problems. You basically, emasculated the United States Army, and it's really bothersome. This administration has. So that's one of the major national security threats we face. Heritage does an annual report. They've done it for the last 10 years. And they're going to come out with one this coming week and a half. And they're going to talk about the status of the U.S. military. And they're going to basically say, we've got a real problem. The U.S. military is weak, and there's a lot of threats out there. In fact, the only branch of service they see is able to conduct duties as they should is the United States Marine Corps.
Man, we've got a lot of problems to tackle here, and we need a good president to help tackle them. So let me return to that NBC piece. There are a couple of things I want to hit with you, but one of them is that there's a bunch of former government officials whose names many of us know who are saying really hysterical things about if Trump becomes president again. William Cohen, the defense secretary in the Clinton administration, said he is a clear and present danger to our democracy, referring to Trump. His support is solid, and I don't think people understand what living in a dictatorship would mean. John Bolton said in an interview with NBC, a second Trump term would be day after day of constitutional crisis. The Justice Department one day, the Pentagon the next, Homeland Security the next. It would be unremitting. Leon Panetta, defense secretary under Obama, CIA director as well, said like any good dictator, he's going to try to use the military to basically perform his will. These are, General Kellogg, these are hysterical statements from former government officials. Why are they doing this?
Yeah, I think they need a little more sleep at night, maybe. I think that, look, what they're saying is just stupid. And the one that really bothered me was Leon Panetta as a former Secretary of Defense. Look, that is such a partisan and dumb comment to make. Look, I've been with the guy. I know. I'm ashamed of people like John Bolton would say stuff like that. What it is, it's fear-mongering. They want to go out and they said, oh, the boogeyman is fast approaching Donald J. Trump. And I challenge people. I said, okay, show me where he's done that. Show me where he's actually had activities or actions that you're worried about that he's done it. Everything they talk about what happened, on January 6th. And look, I said he was following his constitutional right to challenge an election. It was there. Okay, you may not like it, but the things that he did, but it was all framed within the Constitution. Well, if the laws determine that one in some of these court cases, but the fact is, there's fear mongering is just really disturbing to me. Those kind of people you want to park in the corner. It sort of goes back to those 51 national security officials that during the last election came out anti-Trump and talking about the Hunter Biden laptop. Those kind of people, those are voices reasonable people should not listen to at all because it's flawed and they've got flawed judgments.
Yeah.
And it's disappointing that people pick up on it. And I'm really pushing back hard on a lot of people like that who make comments like that. I say, okay, I'll let you make that comment. That's your right. But you show me and you tell me the event or the action that shows his capacity to do that. He hasn't.
There's also some references to things that former Defense Secretary Mark Esper, who worked under Trump, said. Esper, for some reason, I thought the president was entitled to some executive privilege here, but I guess not. He wrote in his book, Esper did, about meeting with Trump, and said that Trump at one point had broached the idea of firing missiles into Mexico to destroy illegal drug labs. What NBC is referring to, of course, is the cartels. Esper told Trump that would be an act of war. Trump replied that the U.S. would deny involvement, Esper wrote. So Esper here is giving away conversations with the president of the United States that include Trump saying something that I would think would be highly classified. The president was trying to basically make a fingerprint-free strike on the cartels. Is this in any way appropriate for a former defense secretary to be speaking or writing?
No, he shouldn't. By the way, I was in that Oval Office meeting, and this was discussion took place with Mark Esper. And what happened, to give you, full disclosure on this, the president was very concerned about the cartels, and that Mexico was becoming a narco state. And as we were talking about options and how do we control the narco state, how do we control the cartels that are down there, which are probably better armed than the Mexican army. And that discussion was how do we do it, and one of the actions was including going after the cartels' locations, the Sinaloa cartel and the other cartels out there. And Esper can talk about it all he wants, but now we're actually talking about some type of military action in there if the cartels don't cease and desist. And it's disturbing he, meaning Esper, would talk about discussions that were in the Oval Office that the Commander-in-Chief and the President were talking about. Look, I think it's a reasonable discussion that we had that day. I was in there. Mark Milley was in there. I was in there. The Chief of Staff was in there. The National Security Advisor to the President, O'Brien, was in there when all this discussion took place. That was not Esper's place to talk about it, but I thought it was a reasonable discussion. And oh, by the way, that discussion is going to have to be had sooner rather than later if what we're seeing in the southern border continues, because the cartels are running this whole thing on human trafficking. They're running the push of the illegal migration into the United States, the fentanyl drugs. We're killing over 100,000 Americans every year.
Yes.
Generally you go to war when you lose 100,000 Americans. So my point is, it's a reasonable discussion. I was there during the discussion. I'm disappointed somebody like Mark Esper would talk about it. But oh, by the way, he was wrong then, and he was wrong now because you pushed back on the president on it. I said, and I told Mark afterwards, Mark, something's going to have to be done with the cartels sooner rather than later. In his point, he just rubbed his hands in a negative manner. But in my personal opinion, Mark Esper was not the right person to be Secretary of Defense then nor now, and I think his decision-making is flawed, and he shouldn't have been talking about it in the first place.
General Keith Kellogg, a name that comes up about a possible Secretary of Defense is yours. Should Trump return to the White House, would that be a position you'd be willing to accept if you were asked?
Look, the president will make a call on any of his cabinet members if and when he is elected. And, my point is I would never put my name out there, talk about it. That's not up to me. It's up to him. He gets to make that choice. He gets to make that decision. And my point is whatever he wants to do is the president. I will support him.
But your career in public service is not over. You still intend to serve the public in whatever capacity you can.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love this nation. I mean, I want to do everything I can to protect this nation and serve this nation. I mean, we come from a pretty good service family. My wife was in the Army. Had my daughter went to West Point, served in Afghanistan in combat. My youngest son was West Point graduate, served in Afghanistan as well. My dad fought for this nation in World War II. I believe in this nation. I believe in supporting this nation. And I would serve in any capacity the best way I could if I was asked to do so again.
And lastly, on the issue of Secretary of Defense, we saw the good news that Lloyd Austin is out of the hospital today. But are you concerned with the notification and the failure to tell the public that the current Secretary of Defense was out of commission and for an extended period of time?
Yeah, I've said this. I've talked about this repeatedly. I said, look, Lloyd Austin's one of the two national command authorities. He's very important to the civilian chain of command. Let's just use CENTCOM as an example with the four-star general in charge, Eric Carrillo. The orders go from the president to the Secretary of Defense to the command commander, Eric Carrillo. Those were the decisions made. When you're cut out of that, and when you don't even tell the president or anybody else that you're out of action, that civilian chain of command is broken, and it was a flawed decision on his part. And I've known Lloyd Austin. I mean, Lloyd Austin has served with me on two separate occasions. He was a brigade commander for me when I commanded the Army's 82nd Airborne Division. But man, he was a bad lapse of judgment on what he did and not telling the president or anybody else what was going on, because it's so critical for civilian control of the military. And I deeply believe in civilian control of the military, and you can't avoid that. You shouldn't let that lapse at all. So he made a mistake, and I mean, he ought to be challenged on it, and he ought to be asked why. I think even the president has questions about it, why he did it, and there's a lot of others involved. His chief of staff, the chief spokesman for the Department of Defense as well, General Ryder. Why did you guys let this happen? How did this get out of hand? And I think it was a huge error. And I think my frustration not only this, but I'll do the giant bridge here. My frustration is there's a lack of accountability in the United States military. And what I mean by that, this is my bridge. We fought a 20-year war in Afghanistan. Oh, by the way, we lost that war. There's never been any accountability for it. We lost 13 great Americans at Abbey Gate during the withdrawal. Why? Why was there no accountability? Why was no discussion about it? What you're seeing right now happening in the Middle East or happening with Ukraine and Russia or the Far East as well. Where's the accountability of our military? So this goes up to the Secretary of Defense. You're accountable, dude. You need to figure out why you didn't tell the president, why you didn't tell the press, why you didn't tell the nation. It's a big miss on your part, Lloyd.
General Keith Kellogg, if you are a part of a future Trump administration, doesn't sound like you'll be abusing the military. It sounds like you'll be fixing it. So I'm grateful for your time today. Thank you very much for all of that. Great talking to General Kellogg. A remainder from that NBC piece, though, that I wanted to hit was this idea that NBC says plenty of rank-and-file members of the armed forces appear sympathetic to Trump's cause. George Washington University's program on extremism found that more than 150 of the nearly 1,200 people who were charged with crimes for the January 6 attack on the Capitol came from a military background, they say. Yeah, remember that? So a bunch of veterans were at the Capitol building because they didn't like what was happening to their country, and they walked into the Capitol, and as a result were turned into extremists by the media and by the Democrat Party. And then, remember, early in the Biden administration, as they were firmly establishing January 6th as one of the high holy days of their party, they began investigating the ranks of the military for extremists. They thought there were white supremacists everywhere, hiding in every barracks, and they needed to have a nationwide, worldwide stand-down order where everyone had to get training, and they had to suss out how many extremists were among them. It turns out the answer to that question was zero, a big fat goose egg. It was a lie. In fact, the Pentagon just released a report in December with no fanfare whatsoever, obviously, that, quote, found no evidence that the number of violent extremists in the military is disproportionate to U.S. society. In fact, they found almost nobody that would qualify under that definition. But they definitely used it to scare the hell out of people and try and hurt the military even more. It's 529. Good afternoon to you. It's 5:36 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Systemic racism is the phrase. The left's been using it for years. They pretend like they're attacking it, but in reality, they're implementing it. That's kind of the whole thing. The left's operation is systemic racism all over the place. They want American companies and the American government to judge people on the basis of their race, to prejudge them, that's what we call prejudice, and then to make decisions about their futures on the basis of their race. It's kind of the whole deal. They're building prejudice into the system. And there's a video today to kind of accentuate the point I'm making here, going around the internet from an Axios interview in June of 2021. This is the CEO of United Airlines. His name is Scott Kirby. And the Axios reporter is talking to him about ways they're making sure that they diversify the pilots who fly the planes. Now, there's some obvious points baked in here, but clearly, if I gave you a choice, would you want a diverse pilot or a competent pilot? What would your answer be? Well, obviously competent. And in fact, here's the fun secret. They may be diverse in the shallow ways that the left assesses all of this. I have no idea how often do you have no idea who your pilot is? I know that they stand there as you walk in. I'm more concerned with finding my seat. I'm like rolling my bag and I'm not looking into the cockpit. What color is the pilot? Is it a man or is it a woman? How fat are they? I'm not making that assessment. Never have, never will. I'm just rolling past, looking for my seat, praying to God that I get there safely. It's amazing what's happening here. And so, but what United Airlines and others are doing are, well, we need to, quote, diversify the cockpit. No, you need the best damn pilots that you can afford to fly your planes. That's it. Why are we complicating this? And in fact, why are we introducing bigotry into an equation that should be about safety? Here's the audio. This is CEO of United Airlines, Scott Kirby, saying they are going to be prejudging the candidates based on the color of their skin.
How is diversity and diversity targets working into the Aviate Academy?
We have committed that 50% of the class of the classes will be women or people of color. Today, only 19% of our pilots at United Airlines are women or people of color. And by the way, from all the data I've seen, that's the highest of any airline in the country.
White males don't just dominate in the cockpits, also in the C-suite at United Airlines.
So the Axios guy is like, hey, the big problem is white men. Too many white men in the cockpit. I think that all the time. I'm like, gosh, I really hope a white man's not flying this plane. That could be a real disaster. Like, what? So he's like, it's not only a problem that you have white men in the cockpit, you also have white men in the C-suite. He's on to something here.
In the cockpits, also in the C-suite at United Airlines.
Well, look, at United, I'm proud of the diversity that we actually have in our C-suite. I think if you look around corporate America.
Correct me if I'm saying, though, so this was just based off your website, the people you list as executives.
Uh-oh, wait a second. He brought receipts. Not diverse enough. I stared at the website. I literally looked at photos, and I made an assessment here. I know nothing about what these people think. I know nothing about their backgrounds. I don't know where they came from, what they believe in, what their ideologies are, who they voted for, whether or not they struggled economically, what their church attendance is like. I know nothing about. I did stare at their photos, though, and I've come to a conclusion.
So this was just based off your website, the people you list as executives, but out of 11 people, 3 are women. I believe 1 is a person of color.
That's correct.
The CEO, as shallow as the reporter.
In corporate America, I think,
That's a low bar. How do you raise your own bar?
Well, a lot of this is, focusing on it. We have programs one of the things we do is for every job when we do an interview, we require women and people of color to be involved in the interview process, bringing people in.
Why? Why? Does someone's genitals increase the quality of their interview questions? Is that what you're saying? What does that have to do with anything? We make sure that every interview we do includes women and people of color? Are you hearing yourself? Do you realize how stupid this is? You should have your best assessors in the room that you can possibly get assessing the quality of these pilots, and you should hire the best pilots. Well, we're telling all of the people who rely on United Airlines to get there safely that they may not necessarily have the best pilot. That wasn't our first priority. Our first priority was, what color are they? Are they a lady? Shallow, stupid, bigoted, all of the above. All of the above. And this is pervasive. This is all over the place. This is corporate America. This is the federal government. The United States military now. It's everywhere. It's all over the place. Here's UPS. There's a commercial from UPS. They're bragging about the same thing. And how they're diversifying package delivery. Take a listen.
People look at me like I'm a unicorn. They've never seen me before, and by me, a black female pilot.
So the commercial starts with a woman who's racked with insecurity. The whole idea is that, every time someone looks at me, they think to themselves, there's no chance she could be. Holy cow, the baggage she's carrying.
My name is Angel.
And it's not just UPS stuff.
Hughes, and I am a first officer at UPS. I fly the Boeing 757 and also the 767. I've been in aviation since I was a young girl, all the way up through...
What is with the music they put on this commercial? They're trying to stereotype her? What is this?
My adult life, I'd only seen maybe a handful of black female pilots. So I created my own organization, Sisters of the Skies. The mission of SOS is to increase the amount of black female pilots, and UPS invests in those programs. I believe UPS is doing a great job at recruiting people of color. One day, being a black female pilot will be the norm. We feel representation absolutely matters. We can help inspire the next generation of pilots.
If it comes to hiring somebody who's going to appear maybe in a magazine photo or something, and you're trying to diversify, to use the left's terms, the people who appear to show that, somebody with a different skin complexion can look good in this outfit or whatever. That makes sense, right? There's nobody's life is on the line. You're trying to sell a product. You want people to identify with it. That makes a lot of sense. Heck, Band-Aid sells Band-Aids nowadays They should have done this a long time ago, that are different colors, that are, so that way, depending on your skin color, it's, less visible, that you have a Band-Aid on. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? But then when it comes to jobs that involve keeping people alive, like flying an airplane, the idea that you would prioritize skin color is moronic. Totally moronic. You should not be disqualified because of your skin color from being able to fly a plane. Why would you do that? Also, the same is true with medical doctors. And this is all happening in the medical industry too, but has there ever been a time where you were like, I demand a certain race of my doctor? No. Do you know anyone in your life, perhaps it's you, who's had to go to a series of doctors for a medical issue? Where you start with your family doctor, your general practitioner, and then you move to some specialist, then you move to a different specialist, and you're narrowing down what it is that you're trying to address, and you move around all these different people. And chances are they're not all the same race. They're all completely different. That's been my experience. It's been the experience of people I know. And never once do I pause and like, I'm going to change the skin color of my Not at all. I'm just looking for the person who can explain it to me the best. What's going on with me? What do I need to do? How can I fix this? On and on. You're assessing your medical situation because you'd like to come out of it improved or better on the other side. The left is trying to corrupt all of this. They've introduced bigotry to this equation. Oh, no, you can't have a white doctor. That would be bad. Why would that be bad? Tell me about that white doctor in particular. What about him makes him bad? So it's crazy. But the left works really hard to instill this line of thinking especially in young people now. It's pervasive in all of our schools. It's baked into the cake that they should prioritize this. That, in fact, this is a virtue. To judge people on the basis of their skin color is a virtue. And if you don't, that there's some sort of moral failing. I've got a piece of audio. I haven't heard this yet, so I'm going to play this for the first time with you. But is this from today on The View? Is this today? Okay, this is today. All right, so The View is always a good place to find insane clips. And today's involves Sarah Haines and Anna Navarro. Apparently, they're debating amongst themselves whether white kids should feel bad about black history. Perfect, just in time for MLK Day, when Martin Luther King wanted these kids to all grow up together and not judge each other on the basis of their skin color. And here's what The View sounds like today on MLK Day.
Black history and other things. Banning books has been weaponized for political purposes to drive people.
By the left, 100%. I'm not going to pause on this. In fact, if I was sitting at the table on The View, I would have screamed, by the left. It's been politicized, distorted, propagandized. It's been the left all along. Did you know that Steven Spielberg's movie Lincoln, when was that? I'm trying to remember which presidential election it was. I think it was 2012. I'm going to double check it right now. So the Lincoln movie came out, let's see, back in 2012. And that was November 9th, 2012. Now, when was the 2012 election? November 6th. Okay, here, now I've got the story lined up. I just want to make sure I remember. So get this. Steven Spielberg had that movie in the can well before the election. It was ready to go. They could release Daniel Day-Lewis as Lincoln in that Steven Spielberg movie ahead of the election. They could have, but they didn't. And do you know why they didn't? Do you know why they didn't release Lincoln before the 2012 election? Because they didn't want Steven Spielberg did not want voters to know that Lincoln was a Republican and for it to affect the election. He wanted to avoid releasing the movie before the 2012 election because he was afraid that people might look favorably upon Republicans for the Union staying together and for slavery ending. That's what Steven Spielberg was scared of because he's a lib. He's a leftist. So he waited. And this is not, I'm not just making this up. You can go look it up. He said this in interviews that he didn't want people to think of that ahead of the election. So that's the left's operation. So here you have on The View, they're like, all this history is being distorted and people don't know. Yeah, by the left.
Has been weaponized for political purposes to drive people to the polls based on outrage because my poor little white kid is feeling bad because he's learning about slavery. That's ridiculous. Learning about history should not make anybody feel bad. We learn about history.
It should make you feel bad.
No,
but it's important that it makes you feel bad.
I don't think it should make you feel bad. I mean, I don't think a white child that's had nothing to do with slavery should feel bad about slavery. I think we need to learn history so that we don't repeat the same mistakes about history.
Yeah, I don't know. She's not getting the message here, as she so often doesn't. The left's operation is racial guilt and a sense of inadequacy. So while they're imposing on what they want to impose on white children is a sense of guilt, they do. They also want to impose a sense on black children, a sense of powerlessness, that they're not going anywhere in their life. And that if any failing befalls them, including by their own hand, like if you do something wrong, normally, no matter who you are, your skin color, it doesn't matter, that there are consequences for your actions. Well, no, actually. If depending on your skin color, even if you commit the crime or do the misdeed, that's because of systemic racism. Like there's some sort of outside force that really compelled you to do that. This is why the left's operation now is that, like, oh, we're not going to impose consequences in schools. Oh, too many black kids are being subjected to punitive actions in schools because of their behavior. They won't say because of their behavior. They'll say it's some outside forces. They call it the school to prison pipeline. They don't even want school resource officers in schools for fear that students will be caught committing crimes and get thrown in prison. So they call it the school to prison pipeline. That's preposterous. You don't go to prison unless you're Donald Trump. You're not going to prison, or a January 6th person. You're not going to prison for doing nothing. You're going to prison because you committed a crime. That is the order of events. And for what it's worth, while we're on the subject, the school resource officer is what we consider community policing. The left often argues for this, like, well, we should have people who know the community, who should be there, who should be able to be on a first name basis with the people that they're helping to protect. Well, that's what a school resource officer is. Students get to know the cop. They get to know that they're a human. They get to humanize each other. The whole thing is beneficial. And the left despises it. And then they turn around and they tell white kids that they should feel guilty, and they tell black kids that they should feel powerless, that they're not going to make it in life, that there's a system designed to oppress them. And all of these kids are being sold lies. All of them. They're being sold the disgusting lies. But the end result of all of that propaganda is you get the CEO of United Airlines sitting on national television saying out loud that he's choosing people to fly his airplanes on the basis of their skin color. That's the end result of that kind of propaganda. And that's how you cause havoc. I've got a story here from the FAA today. It is so crazy. This is the New York Times, Fox News headline. FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. Did you hear that headline just now? The FAA, responsible for the nation's air traffic, is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring, the FAA's website states. They include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism. So the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring regime says they need to hire people who are missing limbs and have severe intellectual disabilities to populate their workforce. This is a mandate. Look, I think that if you have a disability, there should be work for you, no question. If you want to find a job, there are jobs that you can get. But the idea that the FAA is going out of its way to hire people who have severe intellectual disabilities or psychiatric disabilities to work on the nation's air travel kind of seems like a recipe for disaster. Could be wrong. It's 5:52. All right, enjoy the snow. The great one, Mark Levin, up next here on WMAL.